Greetings, Commanders, and welcome to my Elite Dangerous Odyssey First Impressions video. As many of you know, the Elite Dangerous Odyssey Alpha released this week, and we are currently in Phase 1 of the Alpha roadmap. During Phase 1, all Commanders start in the Adityan system, and we all created new characters and are unable to purchase ships. Let's talk about the experience so far. First of all, without any ships, it's worth noting that you will be relying on the in-game taxi service Apex Interstellar for all of your travel needs. These journeys can be incredibly long depending on the location you choose to travel to, so keep that in mind when picking missions. I have provided a list of close-by settlements in the video description. Make sure you pick missions going to these locations for shorter travel times. At the moment, our main areas for testing are missions in the local star system, first steps for on-foot movement and combat, and purchasing suits and weapons from the Pioneer Supplies store. On-foot gameplay, at least for this phase of the alpha, appears to be primarily mission-driven. However, we do know that exploration has received a lot of attention, and we will get to explore that in a later phase. We also know that on-foot combat can be done in a conflict zone through frontline solutions, including dropships that will deposit us in combat areas and allow us to fight it out for the faction of our choosing, but that will come with Phase 2 of the Alpha. The first thing I'd like to comment on is how good this looks. When you first start out, after creating your character, you will be on a planet-side settlement. Already we can see how absolutely stunning even planets with tenuous atmospheres are as we look out at the gorgeous sky beyond the glass. The settlements and stations have all been modelled beautifully, and watching ships enter the station or even just standing in the hangar gazing up at your shuttle before boarding is a really great experience as someone who's been playing the game for years. It is, however, a little laggy in places. This is to be expected with an alpha, and I imagine that we'll see optimization as we go, but I have a rather beefy PC and definitely noticed some FPS drops from time to time, which make combat a little tricky. You will also likely encounter bugs, but I want to emphasize that this is exactly what the alpha is for, and I hope that other commanders will join me in reporting those bugs and providing feedback directly to Frontier. Now I'd like to mention the gameplay loop itself. As I said earlier, at least for this phase of alpha, most of the gameplay is mission driven. You can accept missions from either NPCs with a mission icon above their heads or from any of the terminals on stations and outposts. If you speak with an NPC with a mission, you can negotiate a higher payout, which is a nice callback to older Elite games. Though it would seem there isn't an option to request half up front, unfortunately, though I can understand why. Your chances of success are tied to your reputation with the faction, and if you annoy the mission giver, they may choose not to work with you at all. Terminals give you a list of missions, but it seems that NPCs will always offer a higher payout, so it's worth checking what they have to offer every time you see them. As for mission difficulty, initially they were pretty tricky as it wasn't clear what was needed and some missions were bugged, meaning key items that were supposed to be provided weren't. That does still seem to be the case sometimes, which we'll cover in a moment. You start out with just a flight suit and a kinetic pistol. Combat missions are possible, but if you get into a sticky situation with this loadout, you will likely find yourself critically injured and shipped back to the station with a failed mission on your hands. Some missions really require an arc cutter, which your flight suit does not have equipped. You will need to buy the Maverick suit for 150,000 credits to be able to use the arc cutter. This is not completely clear in the mission text, but if you click the question mark in the bottom right, you'll see a warning that it may be required. I hope that they will make this more obvious for the full release. I personally recommend picking up either transportation missions or, honestly, assassination missions. Transportation missions going to an empty settlement with a lower threat level usually require you to obtain an item from a box outside and return it. However, assassination missions pay out very well, and I find them the most fun. Assassination missions will have you sneaking around a settlement to find a terminal, locate your target in the staff list, and then find a way to get to them and murder them using your method of choice. I personally find overcharging my energy link directly into their spine to be very effective. Then get yourself out of there, call a taxi, and return to the station for a juicy payout. These pay out 500,000 credits or more, which is more than enough to pick up new weapons in the suit. Do keep in mind, however, that covert missions will automatically fail if the alarms go off. If you do find yourself with a bugged mission, it will become clear as you step off the taxi and are warned that you're missing a required item. A good way around this right now is to check your inventory on the station before you leave. If the provided item has indeed not been provided, you can abandon the mission and pick up a different one to prevent yourself from wasting any time. I've also been told that sometimes the item gets stuck in your Apex Interstellar shuttle for some reason, and you could check that by managing your inventory before boarding. With this in mind though, after getting over the initial confusion, I really enjoyed the different mission types. Each mission feels like it requires a slightly different approach. Sometimes I was just straight up murdering someone, others I had to sneak around a very aggressive settlement to loot some personal documents. At one point I made everyone on a settlement very angry and opted to escape into the desert whilst being chased by a very angry Goliath and managed to hide long enough to call myself a taxi and get the heck out. The on-foot missions so far feel fun and varied, but the thing I was most interested in knowing was how the combat plays out. It feels good to me as someone who plays a lot of FPS games, and the gunplay feels pretty great. The lag definitely impacts this negatively, but again, I think this is a side effect of it being an alpha, and I hope to see performance improvements here. After getting a payout, I bought a selection of weapons in the Maverick suit, which opens up the ability to do even more missions and to have other ways of solving different problems using the arc cutter. I'd also like to mention that a few weeks ago I was lucky enough to be invited to a roundtable discussion with other elite commanders, content creators and members of the dev team to talk about Odyssey. We can cover some of the topics in more detail in a future video, but in that discussion we covered a lot of different ways that missions could go. Since technically any mission can devolve into combat, I'm really looking forward to seeing the more heavily armoured Manticore Dominator suit with its extra primary weapon slot so I can carry a rocket launcher as well as my assault rifle and pistol. While we can't do any engineering or upgrades of any kind on suits or weapons yet, it'll be interesting to see how this process goes once it's introduced. I assume we will see it in the beta, but perhaps not the alpha. Engineering and upgrades will require a mixture of goods, assets, data and credits, and I look forward to seeing what this experience is like. It seems you can trade assets for other assets, and presumably this will function similarly to material traders in the live game. So overall, my opinion of Odyssey based on just this phase of the alpha is already pretty high. I'd like to quickly run through some changes and improvements I'd love to see though, so here's my Odyssey wish list. I'd like to see an approximate travel time for missions on the mission board. Right now it's not really possible to easily figure out the exact location of your mission on the system map unless you've already accepted it, so it'd be great to see a rough estimate for how long you'll be in a taxi to get there. This is mostly a problem because we're currently all confined to one very large system, with some missions taking you to 150,000 light seconds out, but it'd still be a nice feature to have. I'd also like to see a note if a mission specifically requires a tool. If you don't own the tool, accepting a mission that requires it is really frustrating, and at the moment you don't find out unless you've landed and run around only to discover you have no way of getting inside without an arc cutter. Also, even if you do own the tool, if you chose a different suit, you can't change suits until you're back in your ship, which is fine if you brought your own, but since you're in a shuttle for Alpha, you're pretty much out of luck. One other quality of life improvement I think would be amazing would be the ability to manually ping a location whilst on a settlement. Right now we can select a location from a terminal, but if I find something I want to come back to later, such as a container I want to loot, or if I want to communicate with my crewmates, I'd like to be able to mark something for them so they can get a trackable icon too. And finally, something I think they've already said that they'll change, Frontier have told us that it's only illegal if you get caught. Why then do I get a bounty if I manage to stealthily do a murder? Even that would be fine if I could pay off the bounty and go about my business, but having to go back to the detention center to pay off before I can continue accepting missions elsewhere is a really frustrating experience. Also, who reported the murder? The dead person I domed behind the planter? Up next, I'm planning on some short guides for getting us started in the alpha, as well as some videos speculating on what we have yet to come. If you've been playing the alpha, please let me know in the comments what you've been enjoying and what's on your Odyssey wishlist. Also, I will be streaming a lot of the Odyssey Alpha on my Twitch channel over the coming weeks, so if you're interested in coming and hanging out with us, I'm over at twitch.tv/Psyche, and I stream Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays at noon BST for about 6 hours a day. In the meantime, walk safe and keep that friendship drive charging, you know, in case you have to run back to your ship and get away quickly from angry guards after murdering their scientists. Definitely didn't happen to me. Bye!